Good morning, everybody. I'm Bryant Huddleston, otherwise known as Haven's servant. He's my son. I'm very proud to be here today. Never in a million years growing up in the South did I think that I would become a father. Being a gay teenager, I just didn't think that was possible. But luckily, as I grew older and matured and got this job and I had more security, and I saw a brochure for families like myself, I realized that I could adopt, and it was feasible for me. And so in that, I met this little guy. Let's see, there he is. And he has changed my life in more ways than I can ever imagine, and changed my family's life. He's affected hundreds of people, and he has no clue. So today, we are doing this panel on single fathers by choice, and choice is the word that obviously pops out here because so many parents out there today just become parents. But we, Alan and I, and even Andrea, have all decided that we wanted to be single parents by choice because it was something in our heart. We knew that this was something we had to do, and we all went about adopting in different fashions. First, I want to say a huge thank you to the Family Equality Council, the work they do across this country, giving faces of all different types of families a voice, but also those of you joining us on Twitter and Facebook with the hashtag FPLA14. Send your questions to us, and we will get them out as soon as possible. You know, this subject is very, very personal to me because it's an important topic. You know, if we don't touch someone in the room here today, I know that our stories and our expertise will affect at least one single father across this country and around the world. And that's the main reason I said yes today to this. You know, I adopted my son through the California foster care system, and I got the call at work around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had 20 minutes to make a decision that would affect so many different people, but it would obviously affect the rest of my life, and I didn't hesitate. And about 4 or 5 months ago, a good friend of mine said, "Do you regret ever doing it?" And I was a little taken back, but then I thought, you know, I have so much going on in my life. I'm a freelance producer. I'm always looking for work. You know, I understood where she was coming from, but I never once hesitated. You know, I was given a couple other children whenever I was going through the process, and it didn't work. I wasn't able to adopt that little boy, that little girl, but I got this kid. And there are so many. There's like 400,000 kids across the country today in the foster care system that are looking for a safe place. They're looking for a place that they can call home. And this is just one of the options. And Alan is up here to discuss another option. And Andrea as well. And Molly's here to really give guidance and to make other parents feel comfortable in knowing that they will be okay with whatever decision they make. I want to start by introducing Alan Bernstein. I thought I was taking something on by being a single dad by choice. Haven was 2 when I got him. But Alan did something really crazy. And I will let him tell his story. Alan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. I'm glad to be here. I'm so happy that Family Equality Council is sponsoring this. I'm the past board chair of Family Equality Council, and we obviously do a lot of work around relationship recognition, but foster care and foster adoption is a huge part of what we want to do and look for every opportunity to get those children into loving, permanent homes. However, that is not how I created my family. I have 3 children. I have a son who's 10. I have twin daughters who are both 8. I've had them all since birth. I created my family through surrogacy. So in my case, although I used 2 different surrogates, I used 1 egg donor. So my 3 children are all biological siblings. They are 21 months apart. Andrea and I had the opportunity to chat a little bit before this. It's worked out well. I don't know that I recommend having 3 children in less than 2 years. I will admit now that when they were born, I didn't lie, but I would not acknowledge that I had 3 under 2. I would say that I had 3 under the age of 3, even when I had 3 under the age of 2, because 3 under 3 sounded dramatic, and 3 under 2 just sounded like I had no idea how biology worked. And it's been great. Like Bryant, I did not grow up. I came out after college, and so it felt like a choice. And at the time I made the choice to come out, it felt like the selection was to live a life with integrity versus having a family. It just seemed like one or the other. And I made the choice at what is now to me a young age to live an honest life and to forego family. And then as I got older, I didn't actually think about it a lot because the choice was made and I was living my life. And so when I was in my 30s, it sort of hit me almost out of the blue. Wow, there are people having families in all kinds of ways. And family creation can be done by choice, and it can be done through adoption, it can be done through surrogacy, and it can be done through co-parenting, and there are grandparents raising children, and there are aunts and uncles raising children. And the world of parenting is just much bigger than in my 22-year-old mind I thought it was. And so I had concerns about how I wanted to do it, and I had a desire to have biological children. And so I went through surrogacy. I used an agency based here in LA called Growing Generations. And a caution, we were joking about this as well. If you're using in vitro is technology that's very effective for people who are having a lot of fertility challenges. But for people like me, for gay men having children by choice, it's possible that all the components going in are pretty solid, and then the technology tends to work, and which is part of how I wound up with 3 children so quickly. And I can go on, but I
that's fine, and you will. A little bit. Next up, Andrea Salazar of Walden Services. I was introduced through a contact, and she was looking for someone from the LGBT community to be a part of their advisory council. And the person that she had spoken to mentioned me, and she called me, and we instantly had a connection. We met, and our stories are so similar. Our children look just alike.
They do.
And she became a parent by choice.
Yes.
And what they're doing and have done for many, many, many years is incredible for potential families. And I'm glad you're here and discuss what Walden Services does and how that could affect a single father.
Sure. So I work for Walden Family Services. It is a private nonprofit foster family agency. A lot of times when people think about adoption, they think 2 things. It's going to cost a lot of money, or I have to go through the county. When I was going through the adoption process with my daughter, I did not know there were private agencies that would not cost me anything out of my own pocket. So I did go through the county. However, there are agencies such as Walden, and you don't have to pay anything. But we definitely hold your hand closer than the county is going to. And I'm not trying to talk bad about the county. I'm just saying there's different services for different people.
It's a little bit more intimate.
It is you're going to have more intimacy. So our headquarters are in San Diego. However, we have offices in Riverside, San Bernardino, Victorville, Palmdale, and now we're moving an office to Encino. And we cover all of the LA area. In Los Angeles alone, sadly, there are 18,000 children who need a family, 18,000 children who are looking to be adopted and loved. And many times in our office, we hold visits for foster parents to bring to see birth mom, birth dad, birth grandparent. And it's really sad. These children who are probably not going to be reunified with any birth family, they're just adorable and loving, and they just want to be loved. Really, you reach your arms out, and they just come to you. We are human rights. We have a Human Rights Commission seal, which means all families are welcome, single men, single women, traditional, same-sex couples. We don't say no to anybody, just as long as you're loving and you fit the requirements that we have. Walden strives to serve the best quality for the children we have. I don't know if you want me to get into what we require.
We'll get back to that.
Okay. So that's a little bit of who we are. We are definitely open to anybody who's interested in adopting to come talk to me, talk to us, visit our website. We offer many programs for our foster kids, for our foster families, for our kids once they are adopted. Once you're a Walden child, you're always a Walden child. So that means that once you are adopted, it's not, okay, goodbye, we'll see you, which was my case when I adopted my daughter to the county. But you will always be able to be provided with services and any assistance that you may need. So,
very good.
That's who we are.
Molly came into this panel kind of late in the game, but I mean, came in gung ho. She's such a, I mean, I just met her this morning and she's my BFF. She's just got a twinkle to her and a real passion for what she does. And it says here that you're an attorney, but you you're legal expert on family building agreements, works internationally with single men who want to be fathers, which I thought was interesting. But we talked briefly about one of your favorite clients, and who is that?
One of my favorite clients is actually a transgender gentleman who lives in Spain, and he's going to be coming back for another round, hopefully very soon. He's got his own daughter right now. She's almost 1.
What does that mean to you? How you've worked so closely with him, and now he's a parent? And
my favorite part of the job is when I get that email after the birth with the picture attachments of the parent holding their child. That is when it all comes together, and it's one of the most beautiful moments. I mean, our office is completely decorated with baby pictures, and that's what this is all about. This is about the end game. Getting there, becoming a parent.
So that's what inspires you to do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I've been helping people become parents for almost 10 years now. I worked for an egg donor agency, I worked for a surrogacy agency, and I became an attorney in 2011 because I wanted to kind of take it to the next level. And the firm I work for now has been in business since 1994 doing strictly family creation type agreements. And we will work with anybody, regardless of whether you're married or single or gay or straight or transgender, just like Walden. There's no discrimination there. But it's really, really important that people becoming parents understand that there are laws out there that might discriminate against you. So when you're doing surrogacy or adoption, you need to have really good professionals on your side to guide you because they need to know the intricacies of the laws. For example, in some states, you can't do surrogacy as a single person. And in some states, every county has different laws, and that's our job. Our job is to guide people and help them get to that end game. We've made a career of basically breaking down all of these barriers and helping clients become parents.
Is it getting easier or harder
for
those states that aren't accepting of certain?
There's some that you see turn around. And there's some that you just see going down a bad road. I think we all know some of those states just keep creating laws that are difficult if you're not married. They're difficult if you're gay. And that doesn't seem right. I mean, the Supreme Court ruled over 50 years ago that everybody who is a citizen of this country has a right to procreation. And it's not proper for a state to enact a law that prevents you from becoming a parent.
Preach. Okay. Alan, walk us through the steps you took. How did you make this happen in a nutshell? Because I know that this is very taxing and a lot of details. But there are men and women out there that would love to know your story.
I'll sort of piggyback to consolidate the story on what Molly said. I mean, the reality is a lot of it is contractual. When you're having children via surrogacy, you don't have to have an agency, and in a sense, you don't even have to have all the legal agreements. But the risks that you run by not doing it that way are so considerable that I would be remiss if I didn't advise people strongly against just trying to do it with a friend and hoping it will all work out well. That will occasionally work, but often it's challenging. So I retained an agency. They helped me establish a relationship with a surrogate. They helped me establish a separate relationship with an egg donor. There was a lot of paperwork. I mean, you know, and this is what I will say. It also, other than the fact that you just are writing a lot of checks, which is obviously a challenge and for some people an insurmountable hurdle. But if you're able to come over that hurdle, it is not in some ways that different than buying a house, where you just have a feeling of, I wanted a house and all I seem to have is paper. And then you get to the pregnancy. But if you have a well-screened surrogate, they are really excited about what they're doing. They are impressive people. I mean, that is a delightful relationship. These are women who have a strong sense of mission, in my experience, to help someone create a family who can't create a family without help. And that was delightful. And in my case, my surrogate was in California. It is possible to have a surrogate relationship with someone who's in a different state and someone who's based on the law. And where you live, that would be a requirement. But in my case, they were 2 or 3 hours away, and I was able to go to the OB appointments and checkups and be part of the ultrasounds and to have a sense of connection and have a sense of progress. And then what I will say, and I think most people will affirm this regardless of whether you create through surrogacy or adoption in a more traditional way, there is a moment where your child is born and your child is in your hands, or with twins where you're juggling. And quite honestly, it all is just a story at that point. The significant thing at that moment becomes your relationship with this new life, or an adoption sometimes with a slightly older life. And then it's just sort of an interesting story of how your family came to be. And my story is a little bit different. I mean, certainly my observation has been, and I joke with friends, that at the very least, the next time you are stuck at a really dull dinner party, you know me, and you will be able to have 10 or 15 minutes of conversation off of my story of how, but beyond that, it really becomes then just about parenting and about being the best and most consistent and most loving parent you can be.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Now, Andrea, earlier you were talking about the checklist or the requirements for Walden.
There are requirements, yes.
And Alan mentioned the paperwork, and that is true. I mean, there is some paperwork for all of us that are wanting to become parents in whatever way. But it's not as taxing as people think, because it's a checklist and your ultimate goal at the bottom is worth every amount of time that you spend on it. And so I don't want people to think, oh, here comes the checklist for Walden, because it's really not that much.
No, it's not.
Go ahead and, in a nutshell, tell us what it is.
And I've been through it myself. So
exactly.
So you kind of just have a checklist, and every time you just feel a completion, and you're that much closer. However, I think sometimes all parents should have to go through a little checklist, but that's a side note. Don't record that. Okay. So if you're interested in working with Walden, what we would do is you would call in, or we would meet with you, and we would invite you to attend an orientation called EPIC. And that's where you would kind of get a breakdown of what the relationship would be working with Walden. Then, of course, you're going to have the paperwork application that you're going to have to complete. There's also going to be some background screening on you. But people need to do that sometimes for jobs. I know I had to do that for my job. And then you would, do the life scan, the pre-screen, discuss any background history that you think might prohibit you from clearing, and what that might be, and how we can work with you to overcome that. And then, of course, you would have to you would have to make sure that your home is appropriate. So we do require that there's 2 bedrooms, one for the child and obviously for you. If they're under the age of 5, you can have 2 children, boy and girl, in the same room. After that, they have to be in their own room. And then you need to have your home child-proof. For that, if you have a pool, is it gated? There's certain standards that were required for you to pass. So that's a little bit of our background. The matching process can take a few months. It could take up to a year. I know when I adopted my daughter, I had her in 2 months. But it depends on what you're looking for too. Are you really focused on just having an infant, or are you looking for a 3 to 4 year old? And are you open to them still being considered a foster child? Sometimes what happens is, as Bryant mentioned his personal situation, that he had 2 children before Haven, and it just didn't work out. And so they were probably reunified with birth family. So you have to be open to that. If you're going to foster first, that it might not work, and you might be taking care of that child, which is very important because you are giving them that stable, loving home in the interim, but they might be reunified with the birth family. And then sometimes it works out, and then it doesn't happen like that. You receive your beautiful child, and then you get to just go ahead and adopt them. My personal story, real quickly, when we brought Savannah home, we had to have visits with the birth parents, and that was very much of a struggle, but we got through it.
And real quick, just to pause that for a second, when you go through adoption through the foster care system, you can choose different routes.
Right, exactly, and that's what I'm trying to say.
With it. I wasn't comfortable with that sort of adoption. You chose that route.
Well,
Continue.
I didn't really choose it. I mean, I thought we were all in the clear.
You wanted Savannah, though.
Yes, I wanted Savannah, so this is what came with her. So we had visits for a few months with the birth father, and then parental rights were taken away. So you need to, when you're working with us, you're going to tell us what you're open to and what you're not open to. Are you open to an open adoption? Are you looking for a child who's on fast track, which means the birth parents' rights have been already terminated, or the birth parents themselves already have terminated their rights? And so we find the match that works for you. We want you to be comfortable. Our social workers are all required to have their master's degree. Our social workers will meet with you once a week, once the child is in your home. Whereas for the county, they meet with you once a month, and then you're lucky if you can reach them in that interim. So our social workers are always on hands for you. I have to say our social workers have become very close friends with our foster families, even our teenagers. Teenagers also need homes, so not only an infant, but it's very difficult right now. We're finding to find homes for teenage girls. So they need a home. We have our social workers who attend college graduations, high school graduations. Walden assists them with paying for scholarships applications. So we have children of all ages, all diversity, all backgrounds, and we just need foster parents and adoptive parents to offer them a stable, loving home so that they can thrive in the community.
One of the things when we had our first advisory council meeting that and I know this probably happens with the state too, with social workers, but they have social workers driving at night with infant babies on the phone trying to find a place to put that baby in. And they're doing it until they find a bed.
Yes.
A bed and a family.
And sometimes the baby will have to stay longer in a hospital.
Because there are no place to go. That's fun. Molly, what's the one thing for men and women out there who are thinking about going this route and having fertility problems? What's one thing that can give them hope at going that route, that they'll be secure in that decision?
Do you mean secure in the decision of choosing?
Yes, choosing that route and hiring your company to represent them.
That you can go home with a child. You can either doing it through adoption or doing it through surrogacy. You can be a parent. This proves it is possible. And nobody should ever feel like there's any barrier in their life that should stand in their way. And if you feel like there is, that's why you surround yourself with good professionals to identify what that barrier is and then remove that barrier together as a team. It's so important to surround yourself with good professionals when you're doing this. I'm sure that you felt that a lot.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, again, there are all kinds of ways of creating families. Many, many ways, and many of them work out. But, surrogates, for instance, are people who, the question you always get when you have a surrogate is, are you afraid that they're going to keep the baby? I mean, it is the question you get. And the answer for me, honestly, was no. No. These are women who have their own children. And look, I'm not a woman. I've never carried life in my body. That's a remarkable experience. It's not my experience. And somehow or other, they are very clear, like, this is my child and this is your child. And they seem, in my observation, to treat it like an honor to be able to carry your child until your child is at the point where you are ready to take it home and be a father. But it's also based on a solid foundation of contracts. And even lawyers don't find contracts to be sort of the sexy and romantic part of this. but it's the foundation for all of the good stuff that parenting affords.
Ellen, do you have any questions for the panel or any questions that you might have?
I was curious about some of the perceptions and misperceptions of adoption.
The biggest, we've talked about this, the biggest, fallacy out there is that people can't afford it. And I mean, there are people in the audience that I worked with in a television show, and I didn't make a lot of money. I should have made way more. And so that was my hurdle. I mean, and also I was single, and that wasn't going to change anytime soon. So, but it wasn't until I found out about foster care through the state that I knew I could, because adopting Haven was a couple $100, and I got it back from my company. And all I needed was a safe place and a big heart. And that's what I was able to do. Haven gets a stipend every month till he's 18. It's not a lot of money, but it's helped with all his child care until he was in kindergarten. And he has insurance, he has dental, and he has opportunities for scholarships. And also there were some other programs that I participated in that will allow us as a family down the road, when he realizes the daddy got, he may need family therapy. So, and it's all free. So, if I were to have other children, it will be free for them, and it's a service that they can use. So I just want, especially the men out there that think that they can't be parents because of their economic situation, that is not true. You can do it.
Thank you.
What about you? What's the one misconception that you've found?
Well, for me, I have a lot of people asking me, if you had a biological child, do you think you'd love them any differently? And that's really a struggle for me, because I remember going to the hospital and seeing my daughter, and we rolled her out of the blanket, and there she was. And I couldn't imagine loving anything more in this world. I mean, she knows she is the apple of my eye, and the love I have for her and the relationship that we have, it's amazing. It's a gift from God. So that, I think, is a misconception, is that is your child, that is your child. And it really, Bryant and I have talked about this, when, you hear celebrities, they've had biological children, they've adopted their children. And people always remind you, oh, they're 2 adopted children, they're 2 biological. It's their child.
Yes.
No matter, it's just your child.
Exactly. I would often, and some of the people in the audience would agree, we were supposed to write stories about Tom Cruise and his children, and I would see scripts written. His adopted children would burn me up. And I may have deleted the word adoption because I thought it was insulting to everybody in that family and to the millions of adopted families across this planet. Because if I were to become a biological father down the road, I am not going to love them any more than Haven. And it's funny when you see Haven and I together, even though it's still not. It's not up there anymore. I mean, we obviously don't look anything alike, but we're like 2 peas in a pod.
Right.
And Savannah, I mean, she looks like you. So I mean, but there's no difference in blood and adoption. I completely agree with you.
Love is love.
Molly, one question before we go to the audience for questions. What would you tell a potential dad thinking to take this on alone that may ease their mind when it comes to legal rights?
Okay. Again, it's all about arming yourself with the information and hiring the right professionals to help you along the way. I know that there's a particular question out there that everybody has in their head when you adopt is, can this be turned around on me? And what's the difference between doing that with adoption versus surrogacy? So I'm going to kind of backtrack real quickly. When you're doing adoption or custody or things like that, the basis of the court's decision is going to be the best interest of the child. When you're doing surrogacy, it's based upon the intent of the parties at the beginning of the agreement. So when you entered into your agreement, it's all about how you felt in your hearts. Now, when it comes to doing an adoption, you want to make sure that is it okay if I go down this road?
Absolutely.
Okay. So basically, the question is, can somebody change their mind about giving up their child for adoption? And these rules are different in every state. This is why you need good professionals, so that you know these ahead of time. But once parental rights are given up, at least in the state of California, you are relinquishing those rights. And while somebody can try to bring a case against you, they're probably not going to be successful. And if anybody does, call me, because I will help you. That's what this is about. When you adopt a child, the judge asks you, you understand that you're taking on this child as though it is your natural child, and they will have all the inheritance rights there too, as though they were your natural child.
I remember that.
Yeah. And that's what it's about. No takebacks, no refunds.
So so the question I ask you is, I mean, this is a little personal, but I will we'll ask anyway. I know Haven's biological mother. She was given an opportunity and did not try to come and be a part of his life again. But there was never a father listed. Let's just say, 5 years down the road, we get a knock at the door, and it's this man who says, "Your son is mine."
Well,
what's the next step?
Well, it's my understanding. Call me. Call me. First thing, call me. The second thing is there's usually a publishing done for any potential father, and that was when he had his opportunity to step forward if he felt like he was a father. The way to become a father, they call it a putative father, is to hold yourself out as a father, to accept the child into your home and to do those things. None of those have happened here. So in your case, I am not worried. But there are cases where the biological father does have connection, but these aren't usually adoption cases. Adoption cases, if anybody steps forward, they sign them out.
A little bit about the public, because it's in the newspaper, right?
Right. They publish it, and they leave it published for a certain amount of time, because to give anybody the right to step forward. And of course, if the mother didn't name a father on the birth certificate, it's difficult to do this. And since
she didn't,
so I'm not really concerned in your case.
Thank you, Molly.
You're very welcome.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Sir, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank all the panelists for being here. We would like to have kids, and I came especially from San Francisco for this panel.
Oh, wow.
Is there a gift? Is there a gift for the longest distance?
I don't need a gift, but your knowledge and experience is gift enough. I'm really fascinated by the title of this panel, Single Dads by Choice. So when you're a father, it's an irrevocable decision, but being single, it may not be. So I'm just curious, at what point in maybe Alan and Brian's life did you decide that you were going to do this by yourself, even though somebody could be right around the corner?
Well, they're still not around the corner.
We're not.
But I knew when I was getting in my mid-30s or whatever that I only wanted to be with someone who wanted to be a dad. So it didn't matter to me about this decision. And then I met someone and I fell for him, and then that didn't work out, and then I headed to therapy. And in therapy, I realized I wasn't really into him. I was into what I thought he was. And what I thought he was a family man, and that wasn't true. And I realized in therapy and talking to my therapist, who's also a single, not a single, but a gay father, that a child was what I wanted. I wanted a family. And so that's where it led down that road. I just knew in my heart that a family was more important than a relationship of that sort. Alan?
I would say this, and first of all, I would feel obliged to give a plug for foster adoption and point out that there are hundreds of thousands in this country of children who are aging up who need homes. And so if that's the route you want to go, that's amazing. It's a slightly different route than I took. If you're having a child from birth, and literally, I was in the hospital, the babies got wheeled back to my room. That is how immediate it was. Then you're taking an 18 to 21 year commitment, and at the risk of quoting Gwyneth Paltrow,
wow.
If we are really entering an age where 10 years is a good try, then I wasn't in a relationship. I was in my 30s. My 30s were sort of dwindling away even. And I was taking on a commitment that was a lifetime commitment, but clearly actively a 2-decade commitment. And I, in part because I'm a parent and I want to model the things that I want my children to learn, I remain absolutely open to the idea of romance and love and lifetime commitments. I think it's important to not be cynical as a parent, in particular, about those sorts of things. But I was prepared to do something actively for 2 decades and for the rest of my life. And I felt like I'm living in a society where people, if you get a 5 or 10-year run, they consider that an honorable effort. And so it just seemed pragmatic to go, you know what? I should do this. And if love comes into my life, that would be wonderful. That would enrich all of our lives. But it's okay to take this on without a ring on my finger.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't always work out. Look at me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was married when we adopted our daughter, and 3.5 years later, separated and divorced. And then I became a single mom. And that was definitely difficult for me because I felt guilty for my daughter. But our relationship became stronger. I mean, so you never know what can happen, even if you go into it with a partner. So
Absolutely.
it's not working. The mic's not working.
In terms of, a lot of people talk about having the child as kind of the end game, but there's so much more after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially for for a birth by surrogacy. For a single gay dad, what do you do about breastfeeding and what other support networks
Sure.
do you have?
We are spending a lot of time talking about family formation, and these sorts of gatherings tend to be focused on family formation. I really do want to emphasize the most exciting thing is that moment when the baby lands in your arms. And as we've all basically said in different ways, that's where the real exciting adventure begins. And, there are options. I was raised in New York City by upper middle class Jewish parents in an era where breastfeeding was considered gauche. And we used Similac when it was, and I've been a healthy adult. And so I made a conscious decision to not do breastfeeding. I have an opinion that part of why breastfeeding is so good for babies is because being held and spoken to is incredibly important for babies, and that naturally happens during breastfeeding. And I made a conscious decision to be very aware of holding the baby and babies a lot and talking to them a lot. My children have been healthy. That being said, there are breast milk banks. There are people who create schemes with their surrogate to maintain the relationship. There are options out there. I didn't pursue that. I will tell you, as somebody who raised 3 children when they were all under the age of 2, I am an unapologetic proponent of childcare. I'm very grateful to live in Los Angeles, where childcare is a relatively affordable thing, and certainly super conscious of the fact that even saying that makes me a person of privilege, and that's not everyone's story, but it is my story. And I think it's incredibly important to hold my children and talk to my children. We were joking about this. I do not think it's incredibly important to do my children's laundry. That being said, some people like doing laundry. They like going grocery shopping. That's great. But I focused my time and my energy on the things that were most interactive with my children and got as much help as I reasonably could to take care of all the other stuff. So I'm happy to answer further, but I hope that sort of gives an overview.
I have a couple of thoughts on the breastfeeding thing. A lot of times in a surrogacy contract, it'll state that the surrogate agrees to provide breast milk for a certain amount of time that she's able to. And there's the milk banks, there's always stuff at the hospital because there's a lot of moms who have to get rid of it. But it can be really helpful for the surrogate. And if you have a great relationship with your surrogate mom and you trust her to breastfeed for you, then that's something that's a complete possibility. Or you could just have her pump.
Any questions? Any other questions? Debbie?
What do you, if you do, tell your kids about the egg donor, the mom?
Great question. In case I know we're recording, the question is, what do you tell your kids about the egg donor, about the surrogate? First of all, that happens. I mean, we're talking about it a lot here from a parent's perspective. I will tell you, as a single parent, certainly as a single dad, one thing that has been very interesting is your kids don't care that you're gay. Like, the only thing kids care about is whether you're in a relationship or not. And so if you're not in a relationship, you're asexual to your children. So the big conversations have not been, as a single dad, about being gay or not gay or anything like that. it's been about having one parent versus having two parents. And I have a few rules about yours, but on a more general level as well. It is normal as a parent, especially a parent with a slightly unusual parenting story, to have anxiety about that. I try to keep my anxiety to myself or to bring it to other places than my children. I don't answer questions that they haven't asked.
I agree.
I simply don't. And for some reason, my kids have been late to ask questions. And so I hear all these conversations about other kids and parents having conversations. Until they ask, I don't answer the question. And this is the hardest part, but to me it's the most important, I try really hard not to over-answer their questions. I mean, there are a million jokes, and I'm not a great joke teller, but about questions that children ask where you basically give huge personal information, but it really was, they just wanted to know sort of where the syrup was on the table. And so when my children have asked about it, I've answered, yes, I call her a friend. I had a friend. Every baby is born out of a woman's belly, is how I put it. And obviously, I couldn't do that. So I was so fortunate to have a friend who was willing to carry you in her belly until she was born. And one thing that's interesting that you don't learn until you have kids around our kids' age, they don't really teach DNA. They teach genealogy in third grade, sort of where you come from. So you got to get ready for that when your story's a little out of the box. But they don't teach DNA. So it's a little bit harder to explain the concept of an egg donor and a surrogate. But I was just able to explain on a very simple level when the question came up. Every baby has a man part and a woman part that helps to create it. And obviously, I was able to be the man part, and I was able to find another friend who is the woman part. And then I waited to be grilled. It hasn't happened yet. So I got a pass for now. And I hope that answers your question. But my biggest advice is not so much about the answer as much as remembering to not give a lot more information to the kids than what they're asking for, because they seem to have a pretty good equilibrium for what they want to know and what they're not quite ready to know.
I find that children are the most understanding of these types of situations. Kids get it. Like with surrogacy, I have a friend who's been a surrogate 3 times, and she says she's in the grocery store and adults will judge her. Adults will say nasty things to her because she's pregnant with somebody else's child. But kids are like, nah, mommy's tummy, she's got a friend and her tummy's broken and she's helping her friend. Kids get it.
Yeah.
It's a simple answers like that. That's all they need to know.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Laura?
Question is for you, actually. Now Haven's in kindergarten, and obviously, even when he was in preschool, a lot of times it's mommy who comes to pick him up, or mommy and daddy are there when you go to events, and mommy and dad. Does he ever ask you about, like, well, how come, Bryant and Laura aren't together and they have kids, and how come Tina and Matt are together and they have kids, and how come you don't have a mommy? Like, has that ever come up for you?
Yeah, the question is, has the fact that I'm a single father coming to get him consistently and being different than other families become a factor? And it hasn't. It's become a factor for some of the kids. They've said a couple of times, he's in kindergarten, where's Haven's mommy? And we actually did, there was a share day with family photo, and obviously it was the first day we met, and he shared that photo, and it was us hugging it out. And two people asked Haven, and the teacher told me later, I didn't realize Haven was adopted. And I was like, yes, I'm white trash, she's Latin. And so, and she was like, his answer made me cry. And he said, my mommy, had me in her belly, but my daddy took me and loves me. And that's all he needs to know. It's the simpleness of that. And people have asked when I picked him up, where's, Haven's mommy? And I said, Haven doesn't have a mommy. Haven has a daddy that loves him a whole lot. And they seem to be okay with that answer. So, we're ready for anything. And,
And also working with an agency such as ours, in the classes we teach you how to speak to your child about whatever the situation may be at whatever age they range. Yeah, that's great. I mean, and my daughter has known since day one that she's adopted, and she'll ask.
So is Haven.
Yeah, I mean, I told her mommy was ill and she couldn't take care of her, and that she was in somebody else's heart, but always in someone else's stomach, but always in my heart. And so through those classes, you learn what's too much, what's enough, and how to go about it. And you'll really find as you develop a relationship with your child, what's the best answer for them. Because what might be the best answer for Savannah may not be the best answer for Haven or vice versa. But you're going to establish that just by parenting on a daily basis with them. So
we've run out of time, so I want to wrap this up real quick. Thank you to all three of you guys for this panel, all your information, all your expertise. I really appreciate it. You can learn more about all the speakers at fertilityplanet.com. Thanks to Fora.tv for making this happen, and you can always follow us at Fertility Planet and on Facebook and Twitter with hashtag FPLA14. You know, so many people talk about, to me, thank you for taking on Haven. You changed his life. But in fact, he changed mine. So many people would have loved that kid. He's a great kid. But he changed mine. He completed me. And that's my story. Thank you all for coming, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.